While I was freezing outside on Christmas Day, my son and his wife, who called me a smelly old man, were celebrating peacefully. But they didn't yet know what such betrayal would mean for them. The snow fell in slow, even flakes that stuck to the driveway like ashes. I stood and listened to the laughter coming from behind the frozen glass of my son's front door. Through the side window I could see a glimpse of their 12-foot Christmas tree, designer decorations sparkling like coins. Michael crossed the foyer with 2 glasses of champagne. Isabella, in a red dress that looked like it had been painted on, pressed her lips to his cheek and pointed to the door where I stood, shivering. He opened it just enough for the cold to hit me. "Dad, we can't tonight." "I came early to make pozole," I said. My words trembled from the cold. "Your mother's recipe." "Isabella's family is here," he said. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of long tables in white porcelain. "This is private." Isabella leaned forward, smiling the way people smile when they're being photographed and don't want to ruin the picture. "Maybe you can come back next week? And please, don't stand there. The smell." She wrinkled her nose as if the winter air offended her. Then, loud enough for me to hear, she said, "It smells like an old garage." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Michael winced, but he said nothing. The pan grew heavy in my arms. "Tamales your mother taught you to fold with your little hands," I thought. I dug in my heel to keep it from sliding in the snow. "I paid for the down payment on this house," I said evenly. "At least let me put these inside." "That was a gift," Isabella replied, all sugar and steel. "A gift doesn't come with visitation rights. Michael." She looked at him, and he gave me a practiced apologetic smile I'd never seen on his face before he married her. "Dad," he said softly, "please." A gust cut through my coat. My fingers were numb, but something hotter moved under my ribs. I looked past them into the glow of their private Christmas and saw my name nowhere. I thought of Elena humming carols in a kitchen fogged with steam, flour on her nose, hair pinned up with a pen. I thought of the promise I'd made at her hospice bed. Keep him close. Keep him honest. You won't have me to soften him. "Tell your guests Feliz Navidad," I said, and held his eyes until I saw him blink. "And Merry Christmas to you, Isabella." I turned before my son could find a last-minute piece of spine. The latch clicked behind me with a final, efficient sound. I set the tamales gently on the porch, like you leave flowers on a grave, and walked across the glittering lawn back to my truck. The old Ford coughed awake. Heat took its slow, reluctant time. While warm air finally started to unfurl at my feet, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I kept pinned to the top, above doctors and plumbers and the pharmacy. Carla answered on the second ring. "Merry Christmas, Robert. You okay?" "I'm fine. I need the file marked Cabrera 2nd. Tonight if you can on Christmas?" "On Christmas," I said, watching frost creep from the corners of the windshield like white ivy. "And call Nora at First Mariner. She'll take your call. Tell her the same thing I'm about to tell you." I talked while the heater thawed my knuckles. Carla had been my attorney when I sold the concrete company and again when I structured the little family trust for tax purposes. Something my accountant had called smart, and Michael had called controlling. My son never read the documents I paid for. Isabella skimmed them, then smiled and kissed his temple and told him not to worry about old man paperwork. In those documents, the pretty blue house with the designer ornaments wasn't a gift. It was a purchase. Michael and Isabella bought the home from the trust at a 6-figure discount under a 20-year note at 2% interest, my interest rate, not the bank's, secured by a second deed of trust and subject to basic homeowner covenants I'd stolen from a good HOA. No illegal rentals, maintain the property, keep current with taxes, insurance, and primary mortgage. And the line that mattered, material misrepresentation or fraud concerning any part of the financing or the property shall constitute default and accelerate the note at the holder's discretion. At the time, they'd signed everything cheerfully. "You're so old school," Isabella laughed, admiring the pen I used. "Who even writes with these anymore?" Michael hadn't looked up from the phone where he was approving the wire from my trust. Carla murmured in my ear, flipping pages in memory. "What happened, Robert?" "They let me stand in the snow, holding your goddaughter's favorite tamales," I said. "That's what happened." Hurt feelings don't accelerate notes. "No," I said, watching a black Mercedes nose into their driveway and two women step out in fur-collared coats. "Fraud does. Do you have any?" "I've had a year of little things that smelled wrong," I replied. "Time to find out where the smell comes from." I spent Christmas afternoon the way one does when something in you hardens. You move, you do small tasks because big decisions have already been made, and you don't want to look straight at them yet. I drove to my house, set Elena's picture back upright on the mantel, boiled water for tea I didn't drink. Then I walked into the spare room where I kept files and sat at the old metal desk that clanked when the drawers opened. The folders were all there because I put them there. I had the monthly bank statements for the trust, the mortgage notices, the HOA assessments for their subdivision, the homeowner's insurance binder that named the trust as loss payee in addition to their bank. Their bank, First Mariner, had Nora in compliance, who'd once said over lunch, "If anything ever smells funny, call me." Something had smelled funny when the auto pay for their property tax nudged up in October. Not the amount, that went up every year like everything else, but the late fee attached to it. Michael had ignored my text about it, then sent a shrug emoji like a teenager. When the HOA change of address card arrived at my house instead of theirs in November, I'd called the management company and been told the owners had switched their mailing to a family office address in a building I recognized from a lawsuit I'd once had with a crooked concrete subcontractor. At the time, I called it sloppiness. Now, ice in the driveway of my heart, I called it something else. On the morning of December 26th, I drove to the credit union and pulled records for the joint emergency account I'd set up years ago when Michael was still my boy. It had a 4-figure balance he could tap with my permission. In mid-November, right around the time their refrigerator went out, allegedly, there was a $3,800 withdrawal at a jewelry store. Same day, a $900 dinner. 2 days later, a cash transfer to a Venmo handle I didn't recognize. Then my trust's insurance policy had sent a notice of additional named insured with a new listing, a rental platform's host guarantee. No illegal rentals, the covenant said. I scanned the folder on my desk and picked up the phone to call Nora. She answered on the first ring, sounding wide awake for someone back at work the day after Christmas. "Mr. Cabrera." "Merry Christmas." "Morning, Nora," I said. "Afraid I'm cashing in that lunch offer." "Ready when you are." "Compliance review," I said. "Property on Larkspur Court. Second deed held by Cabrera Family Trust. I'm going to text you 3 items. An addendum on a short-term rental, a change of address to a third-party manager that's not authorized, and a Venmo that looks like subletting. Also, I need you to check for any liens you might have been asked to cross-collateralize without my signature." "That's specific." "I ran a company for 30 years, I said. "I know the patterns when nice young people start living a little ahead of their means." "Give me a couple hours." I hung up and called Carla. "I'm sending you drafts for a notice of default and acceleration. Use the material misrepresentation clause. Overnight them certified. You realize this will change your son's life." "It will correct his course," I said. "Or it will sink him before he hurts someone else. Either way, my wife isn't here to ask me to be gentle anymore." By noon, Nora texted, "Can you come in at 2?" I did, wearing the only suit I still owned. The bank lobby smelled like eucalyptus and copier toner. Nora brought me into a glass-walled conference room where people could watch your life change if they were bored. She set a file on the table. "We've got 3 issues," she said calmly. The way women say there's a leak under your sink and it's already dripping on the downstairs ceiling. First, unauthorized short-term rental income. That violates your covenant and their first mortgage, too. Second, a home equity line of credit opened in October. $30,000 drawn, supposedly for a kitchen refresh. It required a consent from all interested parties. We have a scanned form with a signature purporting to be yours. She slid a copy across the table. It looked like my signature the way a photograph of you looks like you after your face has been traced by a child. Similar, not right. And third, Nora continued, there was an attempt to cross-collateralize the HELOC against another property for a line increase. It didn't go through because the legal description didn't match the parcel, but the property listed was a cabin in Red Willow, owned free and clear by me, I finished. Elena and I had built that little place with borrowed tools and weekends I'd never get back. We'd fixed the leaky tap together and named the squirrel that ate our tomatoes. I could taste copper in my mouth. Who submitted that? The application came through a mortgage broker who isn't on our approved list. The notary is a cousin of... She caught herself. I shouldn't. Say it, I said, and felt old anger stretching my jaw like a yawn. Her cousin. Isabella's Nora nodded, sympathetic and infuriatingly neutral at the same time. Mr. Cabrera, I can place an immediate freeze on the HELOC pending investigation. Our fraud unit will reach out regarding the signature. The short-term rental violation places them in default. That gives us options. Your second deed gives you options. The cabin attempt? She placed a finger on the paper, as if to hold it steady. That's criminal. I'll handle the criminal, I said. Freeze the line. Send them the notice. And Nora, thank you. My phone buzzed as I drove home. Carla. Notices drafted. Courier on the way. You want to serve personally? Yes. I texted back. I'm feeling old-fashioned. I didn't sleep that night. I walked the house, stopping each time at Elena's picture. I hear you, I told her. I'm doing it the clean way, not the loud way. At 5 a.m., I made coffee stronger than a sermon and drove to Larkspur Court. The snow was crusted now, plow trucks carving clean edges along the curb. A delivery truck idled at the corner with warm air puffing from its grill. I rang the bell. Michael opened the door in slippers, hair wild, face young and soft the way it always looked when he first woke. "Dad?" he said, genuinely surprised. For a moment something like the old reflex reached for me, the one that used to have me ruffle his hair and ask if he wanted pancakes. Then I saw 2 suitcases near the stairs and heard Isabella's voice in the kitchen louder than normal. "Tell him we're busy." The old reflex folded its hands and stepped aside. "I need you to sign for this," I said, holding out the green certified mail cards in the 2 envelopes. He read the return address on one, Carla's office, and the blood drained out of his cheeks. "What is this?" "Read it." He tore the seal the way you tear open a box you aren't sure you want. Isabella stomped into the foyer, robe tied tight, eyes blazing. "Are you kidding me?" Michael whispered, scanning lines. "Default, acceleration, Dad." "I told you to keep him off our doorstep," Isabella hissed, then snatched the paper. She read it faster than he had. Her face didn't change until page 2. "Fraud," she said. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and at last I saw what lived under the sugar. "You're bluffing." "Tell the banker that when she calls," I said. "And tell your cousin the notary to look up the penalty for pushing through a forged consent." Michael's lips moved silently over a line, the way he used to when he was small and brave and practicing reading with his finger. You can't do this on Christmas week." "I can do it on your birthday if the cause exists," I said. "You have 30 days to cure. That means you unwind the rental, you pay the HELOC back, you provide proof all taxes and HOA are current, and you submit to a full review. If you don't, the note comes due. the trust will proceed to foreclosure." Isabella laughed, a bright bark like a howler monkey that had learned to mimic people. "Foreclose? It'll take 6 months minimum. We'll sell before then." "Maybe," I said, "if someone's willing to buy with a clouded title and a bank breathing down your neck. If you do sell, the trust gets paid first. Then the bank. Then whoever else is lined up behind you. You might be left with enough for the security deposit on an apartment. If you move quickly." Michael stared at me, silent. Isabella shoved the papers back into his hands as if they burned. "We'll see you in court," she said, and tried to slam the door. She had forgotten about my boot. It stopped the door like an old oak stops a cart. I didn't raise my voice. "One more thing," I said. "There's a separate envelope for the HELOC. That's from the bank. Freeze notice. Fraud review. So hold off on buying yourself anything shiny for a while." Isabella froze. Just for a second. It told me everything. I stepped back and let them shut the door. In the cold air, I felt something I hadn't since the day we laid Elena to rest. The click of a plan seating itself fully in its grooves. What followed was not cinematic. It was paperwork and time, the two things impatient people fear more than failure. Carla filed the notice of default at the county recorder. Nora's fraud unit requested copies of emails and texts, which I provided, screenshots of Isabella asking Michael to just sign for your dad on a consent form and promising to fix it with her cousin. The short-term rental platform coughed up a page showing their listing live and booked over 8 weekends under a fake name, but with real photos that anyone could compare to the listing Zillow still hosted. The HOA manager emailed me copies of 3 compliance warnings about noise and parking I had never seen. When Carla requested the notary's log, the entries looked neat and regular, until you noticed 2 signatures recorded after office hours on a day the cousin was out of town, according to her own social media. And then the midpoint. Proof of something uglier than arrogance. 3 weeks in, while I was fixing a leaky faucet at the cabin, because some work should always be done by the owner's hands, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Cabrera?" a woman asked, voice trembling. "My name is Elena. Different Elena. I'm calling because I think my sister's husband is involved in something that could hurt you." I sat on the step with the toolbox at my feet. "I'm listening." "Do you know a man named Daniel Ordonez?" "Mortgage broker. He's my brother-in-law. He's been working with a notary named Ivan Torres. They're cousins of Isabella's. He bragged at a party that he could fix any grandpa who tried to hold on to property by hiding it in a trust. I thought he was just drunk. Then I saw paperwork on his desk that had your name on it. Cabrera Trust, Red Willow Cabin. He said it was a cleanup of a collateral package. Why are you calling me?" "Because he's a pig and he hurt my sister. And because my father is the kind of man who would want someone to warn him." I wrote down the address she gave me. A week later, with Carla's investigator, I watched from a car as Daniel carried a banker's box from an office above a nail salon to his BMW. We took pictures. Evidence piled until even a friendly judge could use it for something other than a paperweight. I did one more thing before I brought the hammer down. I asked my granddaughter to lunch. Maya was 9 and serious, with Elena's eyes and my knees always scabbed. Michael had been too proud to tell me they'd named her after my wife. Or maybe Isabella had vetoed telling me, figuring I'd make it sentimental and therefore inconvenient. It was Maya's school friend's mother who told me where she took dance on Thursdays. I parked outside the studio and waited until class ended. Maya came out in a puffy coat and cheap glitter shoes, holding her bag like a little professional. I stood beside the truck and raised a hand. She blinked and then ran to me so fast she knocked the air out of me when she hugged my waist. "Grandpa," she said into my jacket, "Mom says you're busy." "Are you busy now?" "No," I said, and put a hand on her head. "Not now." We sat in a diner where the pancakes came bigger than your face, and the syrup tasted like sugar had gone to heaven and learned to sing. She told me about a recital and the dog I hadn't met and a tooth that wobbled. I told her about a winter when her grandmother and I had no money, and we strung popcorn on a thread to make a garland because beauty can be cheap and still be beautiful. She listened the way 9-year-olds do when they feel safe, with her whole body still and her eyes as round as nickels. "Mom says you're mad," she said finally. "At us." "I'm not mad at you," I said. "I'm mad at some things that happened. Grown-up things. And I'm fixing them." She looked at the butter on her plate as if there might be a message written in it. Then she said, quiet and quick as a swallow, "At Christmas, Mom told Daddy you're a smelly old man." Daddy didn't say anything. I told my doll that wasn't true. I had nothing in my chest where my breath should have been. "Thank you for telling your doll," I said. "Dolls are good listeners." We finished our pancakes and I took her back to the studio where another class had started. At the door she turned, sudden and fierce. "If we have to move," she blurted, "can I stay with you instead of with Grandpa Eric? He has a boathouse but no real house." I blinked. "Who told you you might move?" She bit her lip. "I hear stuff." I crouched and took her hand. The knuckles were small and sturdy, like the knots in old wood. "Whatever happens, you will have a bed and books and someone to listen to your stories. That's a promise." On the last Friday in January, the county recorder stamped the notice of trustees' sale with a date that would have made Elena whistle. A small windfall if your heart was made for it. The bank, satisfied with the fraud evidence, notified Michael and Isabella that their HELOC was closed and the balance due. The district attorney, less sentimental than saints and less hurried than devils, issued a notice that notary Yvonne and broker Daniel were subjects in a fraud investigation. People who had long thought of paper as something they signed when it was placed in front of them began to realize paper could bite. Isabella called me then, not Michael. She started with tears and slipped, when I didn't bite, into precision. "You're going to put your granddaughter out on the street." "I'm going to sell a house to satisfy a debt," I said. "Where my granddaughter sleeps will be your choice." "You don't understand the world we live in," she snapped. "Apologies don't fix credit." "Actions fix credit," I said. "Apologies fix people. Sometimes," she went quiet. "What do you want?" "I want the truth," I said. "On paper, a statement. Everything you tried to do with my signature in my cabin. Who helped, who paid, names, dates, amounts. You sign it, Michael signs it. You hand it to the bank lawyer and the DA. You return anything that can be returned. You send a letter to the HOA accepting the short-term rental fines. And you sit your daughter down and tell her what you called me on Christmas Day. And then," her voice had a quaver now that wasn't acting, "and then, if you do all of that by next Wednesday at 5, I'll exercise the clause under my note that allows me to accept a deed in lieu of foreclosure. You'll be out by the end of next weekend with no sale sign and no spectacle. Your credit will still be hurt. The bank will still expect their money. The DA will still do what they do. But I will not let your shame be a circus. You're enjoying this. I'm enduring it." She hung up without a goodbye. On Wednesday, 5 minutes before 5, my phone buzzed. "Come to the house. Papers ready." I didn't go alone. Carla came, small and fierce, with a notary of her own. We stood in the kitchen where I'd once installed their backsplash on a Saturday because Michael hadn't had time, and I watched them sign statements that made my stomach turn and my jaw unclench. The numbers were bigger than I guessed. The contempt, when reduced to ink, somehow smaller. People often shrink when you finally see them with the lights on. I slid the deed in lieu of foreclosure across the counter. "This means you hand title back to the trust in exchange for our agreement not to pursue a deficiency judgment." Michael picked up the pen, then set it down. He looked at me, really looked. Through the layers of irritation and habit and the desperate wish to be seen as a prince in a kingdom built by someone else. He was my son. He had my eyes. He had his mother's mouth and her stubbornness, misapplied. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked. I don't know how we got here." "You let someone else do the steering," I said, "and you liked how fast it felt." He swallowed and signed. Isabella signed with a firm flourish, as if writing her name the way she always did might make the meaning different this time. Carla notarized. Our notary stamped. Ink left scars more permanent than the ones I got swinging a sledgehammer 30 years ago. We shook hands, not from warmth, but from duty. Then I said the only thing left to say. "You have until Sunday night." They didn't argue. Exhaustion makes even proud people practical. Saturday morning I rented a box truck. Old instincts made me distrust movers I didn't know. I parked in front of the house on Larkspur Court at 7 a.m. and knocked at 7:05. Michael opened in jeans and a hoodie, hair uncombed, eyes red. In the foyer were stacks of cardboard poorly folded and a life reduced to what one could carry without breaking. "I'll take the big pieces," I said. "You pack the small." He nodded like a man in a storm who sees a stranger extend a rope. We worked without talking for 20 minutes. Then he said it, the stone he'd been carrying around his neck. He didn't look up. She shouldn't have said that. About the smell? He flinched. I should have said something. He lifted one end of a dresser. For the first time I saw the shake in his hands, not from weakness, but from fear kept too long. "I wanted her love," he said. "I thought love meant saying yes to everything." "Love means telling the truth before it ruins the person you're protecting," I said. "Drag that end. Watch your fingers." We loaded their couches and their mattresses and the boxes that said decor in a hand that was entirely Isabella's. At noon, Maya came down in leggings and a t-shirt and sat on the stairs with a stuffed rabbit. Isabella stood behind her, arms folded, a queen confined to a different kind of castle. "Maya," I said, and put the strap around the wardrobe. "You can come with me to pick out sheets for your room." Isabella shot me a look. "She's staying with me." I tied the strap. "Then you'll need to work hard to keep her from running after me." Maya stood and put the rabbit in her backpack. She went to her mother, whispered something I couldn't hear, and then trotted past both of us to the truck. She climbed into the cab like she'd practiced at night. She looked back once, eyes unreadable. Isabella pressed her lips together until the blood left them. We drove to my house with the wardrobe and 2 boxes labeled books, because you can always repurchase plates, but you must never be careless with what you read. I carried Maya's things in through the front door Elena had painted blue because of a story she'd heard about front doors, and good luck. I set the wardrobe in the spare room where the metal desk had been. I moved the desk to the garage because paperwork was done for now, and people needed beds more than I needed drawers. We opened the boxes and found 3 dog-eared horse novels and a picture of me holding Maya when she was a baby, my nose bent by her fist. I put the picture on the dresser without ceremony. Maya ran her hand over the dresser's top as if to greet the wood. "Sheets," I said. "But first, a rule." She looked up sharply. "In this house," I said, "we tell the truth when it is expensive. And we say please and thank you because people who have those words in their mouths always have something to eat." She nodded, grave as a judge. "Yes, Grandpa." On Sunday night, after the last box and the last piece of taped-off artwork left Larkspur Court, after Isabella took a photo of herself at the new apartment with her hand on her hip and posted it with a caption about fresh starts that tasted like a lie, I walked through the empty house and listened for the last of the noise to leave. Houses keep a hum after people, a fading radio station you can hear if you stand very still. I called a locksmith. He changed the locks and handed me the keys in a jingling cluster. "New owner?" he asked, making conversation he didn't need. "Old," I said. "And new. On Monday, I met a realtor at 9 a.m. Not one of those who wore cigar smoke like cologne, but a woman who had sold 3 houses for men at my church who didn't have time for foolishness. We walked each room. She made notes. "You'll get offers by Friday," she said. "Inventory's low." "I'm not playing games," I said. "Price it to move." "I want a clean close. The trust will pay the bank. I'll pay the HOA. I'll pay anything that smells like rot so it stops stinking." She looked at me with the worry people reserve for fathers doing surgery on themselves. "You sure?" "I've been sure since Christmas." By Thursday afternoon, 2 cash offers sat on my kitchen table. One from a young couple who'd written a letter about their baby and their wish for a backyard where he could learn to run without falling on concrete. The other from a company that bought houses like a vacuum buys crumbs. Their number was bigger by a hair. I put my finger on the young couple's letter. "Send them the congratulations," I said. "Tell them the house likes lullabies." The sale closed in 15 days. The trust paid the bank its balance. The frozen HELOC became a zero with fees attached that landed on Michael and Isabella like snow in March. Heavy and inescapable. The trust accepted the offers on the HOA fines with no argument because argument is expensive, and we had already bought enough of that this winter. The DA's office, slow as tides and just as certain, filed its charges against the notary and the broker. Isabella's cousin called me one night from a number I didn't recognize, weeping, and I listened to exactly 8 seconds before hanging up. Some calls should end cleanly. When it was all done, I sat at the table Elena and I had bought with the first decent check I'd written myself. I opened the trust checkbook. I wrote 3 checks. The first was to a scholarship fund in Elena's name at the community college down the road, earmarked for women studying to be electricians or plumbers, people who would always find work even when men in suits forgot what real skill looked like. The second was to the church pantry, an amount that would make the coordinator's voice go soft on the phone when she called to say thank you. The third was to a bank account I'd set up that morning with Carla's help. Maya Cabrera Education and Home Fund. I wrote the first deposit and set the pen down. Then I wrote a letter. Michael, I did not do this to you. I did it for you. There is a difference you will understand when you are ready to be a father rather than a boy who has a child. You will not be homeless. I have paid the first and last month's rent on the apartment you chose. After that, you pay your own way. Come by Sunday at noon. I will show you how to build a budget to live in the world you actually inhabit. Bring your pay stubs. Bring your questions. Leave your excuses at home. If Isabella wishes to join you, she may. If she wishes to keep running, she will learn the limits of her legs. You told me once, you smell like an old garage. Here is what an old garage smells like. Effort and oil and things that hold when the weather comes. Bring your nose closer. You might like it. Dad, I left the letter in my mailbox with the flag up, then went to the spare room where Maya lay reading beneath new blue sheets. She looked up as if she'd been waiting for a signal only she could hear. "Did it work?" she asked. "It worked," I said. "Is Daddy mad?" "He's learning," I said. "Learning is uncomfortable, but it doesn't last forever." She nodded as if this matched something she already knew about scraped knees and piano scales. "Can we make tamales?" "We can," I said, my chest loosening for the first time in a month. "But we're going to start with pozole. It's what your grandmother made when we needed to remember we were still ourselves." We cooked on Saturday. I showed Maya how to hold the knife with her fingers curled. She showed me how to measure spices with her palm because her hands, like her grandmother's, already knew what tasted right. We laughed. It sounded like the house was breathing. On Sunday at noon, there was a knock at the door. Michael stood there, hair combed, wearing a shirt with buttons. He held the letter I'd written, folded and unfolded so many times it looked like a map of a place he had a chance to reach if he kept to the path. He smelled like winter air and a man who has decided to try. "Dad," he said, "Come in," I answered. When he crossed the threshold, he paused the way a child does the first time he enters a place he understands has rules not written on the wall but kept in people's bones. He took off his shoes. We sat at the table with legal pads and pencils. I poured coffee. He looked at the cup, then at me, and something in his face went strange and young. Like he was surprised I'd let him drink from the good mug. I wrote numbers. He did the math. He rubbed his forehead the way he used to when fractions got stubborn. He wept once, silently, when we ran the totals for the debt he owed the bank. I let him. A man who cannot cry when his own hands have set his house on fire is a man who will do it again. We built a plan. It included a cheap car sale and a restaurant job on weekends and apologizing to his daughter with specifics rather than sentiments. It included a line, underlined twice, that said, "Call Dad before decisions, not after disasters." That night, after he left, the house was quiet in the good way. I made tea and took it to the porch. The sky had one star stubborn enough to show itself over the city glow. I breathed. The cold entered and left my lungs like a metronome. The phone buzzed. A text. "Thank you." It read. No punctuation. Then a second message. "I'm sorry. I heard her call you names. I didn't stop it. It won't happen again." I typed back, "Learn to speak early and loud. Your daughter is listening. I know," he wrote. "Dad, do you still have Mom's pozole recipe?" I smiled into the dark. "I do. Come next Sunday. Bring onions." A year later, Christmas Day found a small crowd in my living room. Maya cracking jokes, my sister yelling at the football game on TV from the kitchen doorway, men from church who had nowhere else to go that day, laughing with bowls in their hands. The blue house on Larkspur Court belonged to the young couple who sent me a photo of their baby's first steps on the grass. The notary took a plea and lost her commission. The mortgage broker found out the inside of a courtroom looks nothing like an Instagram story. Isabella remarried a man with a boathouse and no real house. The world keeps its patterns. Michael arrived with a pot of beans and a bag of onions. He hugged me with one arm, unsure if a second would be accepted, then saw my hand on his shoulder and forgot to be unsure. Maya barreled in behind him and hung her coat on the peg that used to hold Elena's scarf. The house felt full without feeling crowded. "Smells like Christmas," my sister said, ladling pozole into bowls. "It smells like an old garage," Maya announced, grinning at me. "Grease and good work." Michael winced, then smiled when he saw my face. "Dad," he said, "ready for me to chop?" "Always," I said, handing him a knife. "But hold it like a man who wants to keep all his fingers into the new year." We cooked the way families do when they've walked through winter and decided to stay together anyway. I taught him the right way to scrape a pan. He told me he'd gotten a raise without asking Isabella how to spend it. He told me he remembered how to stand up straight. He didn't say, "I should have done this sooner." He didn't need to. The room knew. When we finally sat, when bowls steamed and spoons clinked and the house sang its low, satisfied song, I thought about a year ago. Cold, adore, a word that should have cut me but instead carved a handle. Betrayal had wanted to make me a fool or a judge. I chose something else, a man who reads a contract and remembers how to swing a hammer, a father who says enough, and then shows what it looks like to build again when the ground still holds your weight. Maya tapped her glass with a spoon. "I want to say something," she announced, as if convening a court. The room quieted. "I'm glad Grandpa didn't leave when it was cold," she said, "because now it's warm." We raised our bowls. Outside, snow began to fall, light, deliberate, each flake landing where it needed to. Inside, the smell was what an old garage smells like when you've finished a job and the engine runs right. Effort, oil, and a relief you can taste.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.